cyber libel law
Yeah.
that doesn't make exception for true statements is a big mistake. It's a mistake that will come back in many ways to hurt, not help.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Invested Lifestyle. Today, we have a very special guest. He's an MLM expert. We're going to talk about the new rules that the FTC is thinking of implementing.
Those of us who have been critical of the industry have been critical of the Federal Trade Commission and the way they treated what's called the Business Opportunity Rule. And so it's a rule that was promulgated by the Federal Trade Commission. It was finalized in 2011, and it had to do with work opportunities at home and the ability to earn income from home-based businesses. And the industry pushed very hard through their trade association to get the FTC to essentially exclude the industry from the rule. They wrote definitions into the rule that effectively excluded the MLM industry. So the rule didn't apply to the industry. And in their conclusion, and this is all documented, this is all public information, they said that any benefits that would come from applying this rule to the industry would not be greater than the costs. I think it was wrong then. I think it was not a true statement then. It's not a true statement now. And I think the FTC may be aware of that. That doesn't mean that the FTC didn't think it was true. I'm not accusing them of lying. I just don't know that they understood the depth of the problem. What they have become increasingly concerned about, and this is for a variety of reasons. It's come from consumer complaints. It's come from work done by truthandadvertising.org. It's come from work done by me and others and things we've written. It's come by growth in the industry, but it's come in part by the pandemic. But what's happened over time is the FTC has become increasingly aware of these misleading money-making and earnings claims. So they have already addressed this issue in other industries. So, for example, there's a franchise rule in the United States that specifies what companies must say to someone who's thinking about getting a franchise. There's the business opportunity rule, which does apply to some companies, but not MLMs. There's a telemarketing rule that requires companies who do telemarketing to reveal to people issues about earnings. But the MLMs have been pretty much left off the hook. And so during the pandemic, the FTC sent warning letters out to MLM companies for misleading product and earnings claims. And then this last fall, they sent out letters again. It was fall. They sent out letters again to 1,100 companies about earnings claims, and I think 700 of them were MLMs. So they've gotten increasingly concerned of the depth of this problem. And so what they have done is it's called Advance Notification of the Promulgation of a Rule. It's called ANPR. And it's part of a formal process that they're required to participate in. And what they are doing with this ANPR is letting the public know they may be creating a rule with regard to money making and earnings claims. The first step there is, in a sense, them deciding whether to go to the second step. So the first step is we're thinking about creating a new rule. What do you think about that? And so they've put out a document, you have it, that describes why they are thinking about it and asks some questions about it. I've taken that document and sort of tried to put it into the everyday language that I would do if I was going to teach my students it. The idea here, and part of the reason that I appreciate you inviting me to participate here, is to encourage people from around the world to submit a comment. And you can look at the original document. You look at the slides that I put together that sort of outlines the different topic areas that the FTC is open to. But we would want to encourage people from around the world who have some concerns or some questions who would like to see this industry to be better regulated, we want to encourage them to submit a comment. Submitting comments easy. It's just through a link. The link is now open. The link will be open until May 10th. We want to encourage literally thousands and thousands and thousands of people from around the world, even if your only comment is a single paragraph or so about what your concern is or what your experience is. Anytime you can also reference any kind of evidence or examples, that's helpful. There is a process. It's a related but somewhat separate process if you wanted to submit confidential information. But whether you have a lot to say or you have a little to say, go ahead and put it in. And if you have firsthand experience as a participant, if you have a concern, if your son or daughter or your husband or wife or your partner or whomever got involved and you saw firsthand issues about misrepresentations, about earnings, etc., you can put that in. I will say this is not about product claims. The FTC has focused this just on earnings claims. In a sense, product claims and earning claims are somewhat related in that if you make outrageous product claims, part of the reason for doing so is to increase your sales. But the focus is on earnings claims. And I would just like to, encourage the people that listen to you and that respect your view to go ahead and submit a claim and encourage others to do that. Earnings claims, I guess, in my mind anyhow, are most evident when either recruiting someone or trying to retain someone.
Yeah.
So when we're recruiting people, what's being said or not said about who makes what, how that information is presented. Is it presented in a fair or deceptive way? For example, presenting earnings as averages is misleading. Because if we have two people, one person makes nothing and the other person makes $1 million, then the average is $500,000.
Yeah.
That really isn't helpful. So when we look at the distribution of earnings in MLMs, we see it's very uneven. When they present the average, that isn't by any means telling you what the typical person experiences. And so, in short, the vast majority of people in the MLMs that we have data on earn much less than the average. More than 50% of the people earn less than the average. And that may not be make sense. It's like, how can more than 50 of the people make less than the average if it's the average? Well, it's because of the skewed distribution. Right. If we had only 3 people and 2 made nothing and 1 made $1 million, then the average would be $333,000, $333. So clearly that's not indicative of what's happening with most people. And so the issue here is, are these communications about earnings honest and truthful, and actually do they represent the typical or the likely outcome? The FTC has used the word typical and the word likely as opposed to average. Not in other words, the FTC does not like the use of averages because they know what's happening there. And in fact, in the le-vel case, the court specifically, or the agreement specifically, said that le-vel cannot rely solely on those averages. The kind of information that's being communicated, information about lifestyles, that's beginning to suggest that you too can live this luxurious lifestyle with these fancy cars, fancy boats, fancy houses, fancy vacations, etc. When in fact, the likelihood of doing so is very, very slim, and we're not even sure if it's a fair playing field. In other words, if you have 10 people who are trying real hard and one does achieve success, who was that? Was that somebody who was connected, or someone who was related, or something like that? Or was it a fair competition? So we have a lot of questions about that. And again, because most MLMs are private, they don't have to reveal any of that information. It's a real problem. And so you can talk about lifestyles. You can talk about actual disclosures that have been made to you. You could have screenshots of what people have said to you in social media or in emails or in text or whatever. Anything that helps to support the impression that was purposely made about making money. And these impressions are purposeful. Often if you were to look across, and I'm sure you've done this, Elaine, you look across social media messages or stuff, you just see a repetitive pattern, or you see people telling stories. I knew this person who or that. None of those stories, or few of those stories, are easily verifiable. But they're stories nonetheless. If you've been exposed to those kinds of messages, if you joined in pursuit of a business opportunity, only later you found out that the vast majority of the people actually ended up being financially worse off. If you got attracted to it, the opportunity because of lifestyle statements that cannot be easily verified. All of these things could be used in a comment. If you have evidence that talks about duplication, that talks about somebody on this leg and somebody on that leg, and then you're going to reward so much, then I would definitely include that. I'm involved in a case now, a private case, where as part of my report, I addressed this issue of process, not just outcome. So when we think about earnings claims, we think about, well, am I going to get to be rich, right? Am I going to get to have $10 million or whatever? But the process can also be deceptive. As I mentioned earlier, to suggest that anybody or everybody can do this is incorrect. It's just simply not true. And so to suggest that if you follow these steps, or we have the proven process, or we have the proven business model, well, there's a problem with that. If in fact most people who participate in the proven steps or the proven business model are financially worse off. And so if the business process itself, the steps that are being recommended, if those are linked to earnings claims, then yes, they certainly should be included.
Networkers, they get recruited as early as 7. They become part of an MLM. Over here in the US, you need to wait until they're 18, right? But I guess they're running out of people that they think kids should be in MLMs now.
Well, there is no law that tells people what to do with an MLM, right? There isn't even a law that actually describe, not a piece of legislation that describes a pyramid scheme. Pyramid scheme is case law, case upon case. To go to your specific example, I think in the United States you have to be 18 to enter into a contract, and so to the extent that this is a formal contract. You are signing something that commits you to some policies. And in some cases in the United States, that you are actually giving up constitutional rights. In some cases, you're giving up the right to take this company to court as you go into an arbitration agreement, a forced arbitration agreement. Or you give up the right to publicly say something negative about the company, which is giving up on your First Amendment rights just to speak publicly and freely. So you can't give up those rights freely, I think, unless you're 18 in the United States. That doesn't mean that there aren't young people younger than 18 who are helping out with their family's MLM or whatever, they're down in somebody's downline. But I think that's true. But there is no law that I know of about multiple accounts or things like that. The issue here is what do we see in companies that get successfully prosecuted for pyramid schemes.
Mhm.
Right? So we would probably see duplicate accounts. I was involved in a case. It was a cryptocurrency case where people were buying multiple accounts. So, you know, is that a red flag when the FTC looks at it? Yeah, it is.
Mhm.
But that goes back to the issue you raised earlier, which will the FTC look at it?
Yeah.
Well, they've got lots of things to look at, and they're not going to look at them all. And for those of your people who listen to you and tune into what you have to say, the industry is going to fight really hard against the FTC. So even if you're not the kind of person who typically complains,
Mhm.
this would be a good time. And the FTC is open to it. The FTC wants to hear what has been people's experience. And I'm not anyone to try to tell anybody what they think that their religion tells them to do. But I think that most religions that I'm familiar with, seek to have a kinder, more civilized kind of world. Where people aren't taken advantage of. And the FTC is giving us an opportunity to share information with them so they can see if they could help make a world that where there are fewer consumers who are harmed. People could get into debates about what authorities, for example, want them to do or to not do. But in the end, it's our families, our communities, our friends. So whatever we might think, we're really talking about people we care about.
Logic tells me that the more complaints that the FTC gets is the more they will act on it, right? On a certain company.
Yeah. The numbers count for sure. Quantity matters. And, even in the United States. So I would give the FTC compliments for the fact that they have done things that regulatory agencies in other countries have not yet done with regard to this industry. And so I would say that there are regulatory agencies in governments around the world who have been really asleep in terms of the harm caused by this industry. So I give the FTC good credit for that. And so, we think that this is a good time for people to share with the FTC. The FTC wants to see that. However, because the FTC is, of course, part of the government, and the government is subject to lobbying from businesses, et cetera, we are going to see not just the trade association, the direct selling association, not just the large MLMs, but we will see actual politicians pressure the FTC to leave this alone. Just like in many countries, powerful men and women have connections politically, maybe through the electoral process and maybe through personal relationships or whatever. And these people have opinions and they have money. And so we can be pretty confident that there's going to be some pretty strong opinions and probably some money spent to try to limit the FTC's efforts here. And that's why having a large number of complaints, having well-supported complaints if we have support, but even if you don't have anything other than your own personal experience, a one-paragraph story is better than no complaint at all. And even in the United States, research has shown that, and this is FTC survey research, that of the 10 top types of consumer fraud, pyramid scheme victims are by far the least likely to complain. We know that there's a hesitancy. We know sometimes people are embarrassed. We know sometimes people blame themselves because the people around them that were in the MLM blame them for their failure, tell them that, the only people who don't succeed are the people who quit trying. And so we know that, in fact, deciding to complain isn't a sort of natural thing to do. It's easier in some ways to just sort of walk away. But the reality is that the feeling of what happened doesn't go away. So if you've made the decision to be part of an MLM and it didn't work out the way you had hoped, and you blame yourself, or you blame somebody else for not being honest with you, you will remember that for a long time. You're not going to forget that soon. And so we want to share complaints with the FTC so this happens less often.
I also want to add that in the Philippines, they already passed a law back in 2012 about cyber libel. So if you speak out against anyone or a corporation, even if it's true, as long as you destroy their reputation, you can be jailed up to 12 years. So that is the reason why I'm the only YouTuber and one more that's speaking out against MLMs, but we're both not in the Philippines. We're both not Filipino citizens. So if you can't speak out publicly about MLMs, this might be your only chance in a decade to tell your story, and someone will listen. Someone that has the power to do something about it will listen. I'm gonna do a live, and then we can all talk about the process. I'm gonna walk you through it on how to do it. I'm not gonna tell you what to say, but just the process. Yeah, just the process of how do you submit it, because some people they don't know how to navigate the FTC website. It's a little bit confusing too. Everyone is losing hope. I mean, we're against powerful people here. Against powerful people here. Yeah.
Well, I've been doing this for more than 20 years and I haven't lost hope. First of all, I just want to say that cyber libel law that doesn't make exception for true statements is a big mistake. And it's a mistake that will come back in many ways to hurt, not help. And so when you try to limit from a legal perspective people sharing true information, then you are actually creating an environment, right, which is going to cause harm. So that law is not a good law. You are right. I am optimistic. It's a funny thing. I believe in general that teachers are optimistic, K through 12 and college teachers, because, we go in and we teach our classes and we give our exams, and then we look at the exams and we go, oh, gee, those students didn't do as well as I'd hoped they would do. And then the next semester, we do exactly the same thing. And, we try to improve and we try to make changes, and we look at the exam again, and then we're still sometimes disappointed. So you have to be optimistic. You have to be able to believe that, in fact, small things do make a big difference. And this is a good example. We certainly should not despair.
Yeah.
It's a good example of being invited to make a small contribution that can have a big cumulative difference. I do believe, and I've not participated in this process before, but I do believe you will actually be able to see the public comments as they start to come in. I do think that people need to know that your name will be there.
Yeah.
Right. But in fact, just as you are a citizen and not a citizen of the Philippines, so you are not subject to that cyber liability law, the people who are outside the United States are making a contribution to a regulatory environment. If we have a positive impact on the MLMs here with this, there's a good chance it'll ripple around the world.
Yes.
And
I believe that.
there is a network. It's called the International Consumer Protection Enforcement Network. And it's a network of enforcement officers, whether they be lawyers or investigators for federal governments around the world. Some of the people of that network participated in our last conference. We hope they're going to participate in this conference. I was invited to give a keynote talk at one of their workshops on pyramid schemes and MLM. And then a colleague of mine was invited to give another talk with them. And so there is an increasing international concern for an industry that has been causing consumer harm.
I don't know if you agree with me here, but I also blame the US for MLMs. Like, if not for the Amway decision, like they always refer to that Amway decision. That's why there's proliferation of
Right.
MLMs around the world. Yeah.
Right. So here's a couple of things. I believe the FTC erred in the Amway decision, at least for not asking for supporting data. So when Amway said that they had corporate policies to help ensure that they were not a pyramid scheme, and we could talk about those policies, but when they said they had these policies, they described the policies, the FTC said, okay. And the administrative law judge said, okay. They never asked for the data to see if the policy was working. They never asked the judge to allow them to monitor the Amway to see if the policies continued to work. But because Amway used these policies as their primary defense, I feel like the FTC erred by not making sure that the policies did what Amway said they were going to do. That's the first part. The second part is MLM companies after Amway have around the world said, we're like Amway, we have these policies. So there's two issues there. One, if you actually look at the language of many MLMs that are supposed to be duplicate of the policies of Amway, it's not the same language. They change it. They change it to their advantage. And so to say that these are the same protections, they're not the same. And the words aren't the same. And the impact of those words isn't the same. So in fact, there are MLMs who claim that they have adopted the Amway safeguards, and they did not. They bastardized the language. Sorry, can I say that?
Yeah, you can say that.
They bastardized the language to fit their own purposes. The other issue there is we still have no evidence of whether Amway safeguards work for Amway, whether they work for other MLMs. There's no transparency there whatsoever.
Even if you think there's no hope, we still have to try. Like, what's there for us?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no mileage in not trying, and I think that there's a sort of equilibrium inside of us that we, if we feel like we've been wronged, and we can do something, even if we may not be able to make it right. Right. The world doesn't even everything out in every individual's life. It doesn't happen that way. Perhaps something happens in the afterlife, but it certainly doesn't happen that everybody's life gets equalized while they're still alive. Right. But we're on this, spinning globe that goes around the sun together, and we're creating generations of people, and we can have an impact on what other people experience. We can do it geographically from one country to another, and we can do it over time from one generation to another. Yeah. So we have more power than we think, even if the immediate short-term impact isn't really going to change our situation.
Exactly. And change is always incremental. So even if we just do a little thing today, maybe we can do another little thing tomorrow. And I would just want to thank you, Bill, for all this education and knowledge. It's just amazing talking to you. My last question, and I want to end with hope again. Like, especially in the Philippines, what else is there? because I also hear that from the recruiters. If you don't join our MLM, what else is there for you? It does have a truth
Right.
in it, because there's really a lot of inequality in our society right now.
Right.
What would you say to the people who doesn't have the same opportunity as us?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we aren't going to solve the problem of inequality and poverty
Mm-hmm.
with or without MLMs.
Mm-hmm.
MLMs are not going to solve it. Participating in MLMs is not going to solve it. The best chance of having moving from a life that they're not happy with to a life where they feel like a little more financial security, a little more happiness, is some sort of education. It doesn't have to be formal education. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Learning trades, right? Learning how to do business. I mean, Andrew Carnegie became the wealthiest man in the world
Mm-hmm.
with a third grade education,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the learning how to do something that other people will pay you for, whether it's a service or a product, learning how to make that more valuable to people, learning how to grow your efforts, whether it's your own or if you bring on other people. But if you're going to do that, you have to pay attention to the details. You have to pay attention to the numbers. You have to pay attention to how people are treated and how you are treated. And so, but you, in a sense, you have to invest in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because the society, for a whole host of reasons, sort of underinvested in its population.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it didn't have the money for it. Maybe there were other priorities that were sapping away resources. But when a society underinvests in its population, it's left to the individual to try to change the course of their own life. Not easy. And sometimes you are actually, competing against other interests that sort of like just keep the status quo or something like that. But quietly, in small ways, I think you can invest in yourself. And it always feels good
Mm-hmm.
to feel like you've done something for yourself and your family. And so I think that, but it's not easy. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes persistence, but it's doable. And the one nice thing now more than ever is if you're using the internet to look at pictures of cats and dogs and not to become to invest in yourself, then you're using the internet wrong.
Yeah, there are a lot of free courses like Udemy. Yeah, there's a lot. I even listen to lectures of in Yale. It's free online. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and I want to go back to what you said before, and I just want to add it to that. Being rich is really not the purpose. Like, it shouldn't be your purpose. Your purpose should just be like be able to take care of yourself and your family. Like,
Right.
I'd rather be you or Robert that has a lot of impact in the lives of people, making the lives of people better, than be like a billionaire, which like just they have a lot of impact, but I mean, mathematically we can't be all billionaires.
We can't, and I'm not sure if I'm a billionaire,
Yeah.
do I even have an appreciation
Mhm.
for people's situations? Do I really have a sense of that? I mean, we have people who are maybe not billionaires, but certainly very wealthy people who wouldn't even know how to use a scanner in a grocery store,
Mhm.
right? People whose lives are so detached from the average citizen's life. And so it isn't clear to me that those people have the information they would need or even the desire to make positive change. Maybe some do, and I hope that's true, but I'm not convinced of it.
Yeah, so I like what you said. Like, for all the audiences that are listening to us, for our community, I think the goal is really just to make a positive change in society, and just even little by little. And I think your comments, your contribution here, if you start here, it will really make a great impact,
That's
right?
right.
Yeah,
That's
around
exactly
the
right.
world, not even just in our country, in the US, around the world.
I think in the end, most of us all want the same thing, right? We want to enjoy our day. We would like to not always be on some financial cliff that, if anything bad happens, that our finances completely fall apart. We want to have health. We want good things for our children. We want to be able to do nice things for them. They don't have to be fancy things, they don't have to be expensive things, but we want to be able to do these things. The other thing that I've seen with MLMs, and you see this in some of the documentary about le-vel and others, is that the MLMs can actually take people away from those things, take them away from their families, take them away from their friends. I think we enjoy our friends and our family, and we want those good things for them. And in the end, life's short.
And hopefully this really creates a change, and like a change of even your perspective, this video in life.
But I would encourage
Yeah.
anyone to go out and get basic financial information, because how we handle money, how we think about money, impacts our lives. And so there's a lot of free basic financial information out on the internet. I mean, there's a lot of it. And the one thing that you should do, particularly if you get involved in MLM, but even not, is watch your expenses. It doesn't mean you can spend your money however you want. You just should know you spend it, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
if you want to if you want to go out to lunch every day and that's the way you want to spend your money, that's fine. Just make sure you know how much you spend.
Yeah, and for me, yeah, you're right. I don't care how you spend your money, but I care about your expectations. Like, yeah, I care about people telling you honestly the truth. Like, if you tell me that my iPhone is gonna have 5G, it has to have 5G.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want people to know that businesses and governments and individuals don't always have their best interests at heart. That may not be intentional, or maybe, but if you think of all the people out there in the world, it's not easy for governments or businesses or other individuals to have everybody's best interest at heart. So we have to recognize that would be a very hard thing for people to do. So we have to take some responsibility for ourselves and our families. So anyhow, they can always reach me through you. I'm happy to send information to people or to respond to their questions. I can't change things with them. In other words, I am involved in a couple of court cases against MLMs, but I'm not in a position to, if I write to an MLM and tell them to stop doing something, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. But you're doing more than enough already. Bill created this like amazing slide deck, and it's gonna be in the website www.mlmchange.org. If you want to read more about what we're doing regarding the FTC regulations, right?
Yeah, and if they look through that and they've got questions, I'm happy to answer those questions. They can email me because I hope that it's a little more clear than the document. The document from the FTC was written by a lawyer, and it looks like it's been written by a lawyer, and they have to do that, right? But I tried to make it a little more clear, and if they still have some questions, they can email me.
Thank you so much. You don't know how much this will help the people. Yeah, I don't know what to say anymore. But
maybe we will talk again.
Yeah, we will talk again, especially when your website goes live. Right, you're always welcome. And everyone, If you like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to everyone that you think that this video can help. Always remember, the only people mad at you for telling the truth are the people who are living a lie. Right?
Okay.